The diamond ring glimmered under the soft morning light, catching on the edge of the gray velvet sofa like a tiny explosion of truth. At first, Lillian Hart didn't process what she was seeing. She had been reaching for her son's missing toy car when her fingers brushed something cold, sharp, and unmistakably expensive. A wedding ring. Platinum. Tiffany cut. Far larger and far flashier than the modest band Adrian had placed on her finger 7 years ago. Her breath faltered. She hadn't worn anything like this a day in her life. For a moment, the penthouse felt too quiet, as if even the Manhattan traffic below had paused to witness the unraveling of her world. Lillian stared at the ring, her pulse pounding in her ears. It didn't belong to her. It didn't belong in her home. It didn't belong on her sofa, where her son often curled beside her every night Adrian claimed to be working late. Her hands trembled. It wasn't just the ring itself, it was the faint trace of Chanel on the fabric beneath it, a fragrance she had never owned. And then came the soft little voice behind her. "Mommy," her 6-year-old whispered, rubbing his tired eyes. "Is the pretty lady with shiny shoes coming back? She sat there yesterday when Daddy told me to stay in my room." The ring slipped from Lillian's fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a sound far louder than it should have been. A sound that broke something inside her. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply stood very still, her world narrowing into a sharp, painful clarity. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a message, left right where she would find it. And though she didn't know it yet, this moment would be the beginning of the night she decided to disappear. Quietly. Completely. Before Adrian Locke realized his control over her was slipping, because the ring was only the first betrayal, and the next one would be far worse. Lillian Hart had always been the kind of woman people underestimated. Soft-spoken, gentle, the type who remembered birthdays, packed homemade lunches, and apologized even when she wasn't wrong. At 30, she looked younger than her age, not because she lived a carefree life, but because she carried everything quietly, without letting the world see the weight she held. Her brown hair was usually tied back in a loose knot, and her sweaters were simple, worn from too many nights spent sketching at the kitchen table while her son slept. Before marriage, she had dreams, real ones. She wanted to illustrate children's books, to fill pages with warmth and imagination, to build something that belonged to her alone. But after marrying Adrian Locke, those dreams slowly dimmed, replaced by the silent expectation that she should fit the mold of a perfect wife in a high-rise Manhattan penthouse. Adrian made it sound like a gift when he told her she didn't need to work. "Just focus on the home. Let me take care of the rest." And for a while she believed him. But rest meant control. It meant her name on nothing. It meant asking for permission before buying anything that wasn't groceries. It meant losing herself piece by piece, without even realizing. Her only anchor was her son, Oliver, a bright, sensitive 6-year-old with big questions and a bigger heart. He was the reason she woke early, the reason she endured the cold silence of the penthouse, the reason she kept forgiving Adrian's late nights and missing wedding anniversaries. She wanted him to grow up in a home she never had. She had been raised by a single mother in a small Ohio town, abandoned by her own father without warning. The memory of that door closing haunted her, shaping every choice she made as an adult. She swore her child would never feel what she felt. Loneliness disguised as normalcy. But standing there with a stranger's diamond ring in her trembling hand, she felt a familiar ache rise in her chest. The same ache she felt at 8 years old. The same ache she spent years trying to silence. This time, though, she wasn't a helpless child. She was a mother. and a mother, once broken, could become dangerous in ways no one expected. The penthouse itself was a world built to impress, not to live in. Perched high above Tribeca, it had floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Manhattan skyline like a moving painting. At night, the city glittered in gold and silver tones, a constant reminder of the life Adrian Locke believed he had earned. Powerful, untouchable, enviable. Every surface gleamed, marble counters imported from Italy, polished floors that reflected the soft glow of the recessed lights, and a minimalist aesthetic that felt more like a showroom than a home. Lillian often felt like a guest there. Nothing in the apartment bore her handwriting. No framed sketches, no childhood photos, no evidence of the life she had once imagined for herself. Even Oliver's toys were tucked into a single designated cabinet, hidden away so the penthouse would look presentable whenever Adrian invited colleagues over for late-night drinks. Even the sofa where she found the ring felt foreign, too pristine, too untouched, like it belonged to a man who cared more about appearances than the people who sat on it. Adrian thrived in this environment. His office on Park Avenue mirrored the same sharpness, the same cold beauty, glass walls, chrome accents, a Montblanc pen always on his desk, positioned perfectly as if photographed for a magazine. To him, success wasn't a feeling. It was an image, and he curated that image the way some men curated art collections, obsessively, ruthlessly, without concern for the souls behind the scenes. This world had consumed Lillian slowly. The luxury was dazzling at first. Dinners at the River Cafe, holiday trips to the Hamptons, a Mercedes G-Class she wasn't allowed to drive. But over time, the shine faded, revealing how isolating wealth could be when you had no power of your own. Even the air felt different in the penthouse now, heavy, watchful, as if the walls themselves had seen what she had ignored for too long. The faint scent of someone else's perfume still lingered, woven into the cushions, impossible to scrub away. It struck her then. A home shouldn't feel like a trap. And yet, the more she looked around, the more she realized she had been living inside one, built not of bricks, but of silence, secrets, and a man who believed she couldn't survive without him. He was wrong. Adrian Locke walked through the world as if gravity bent for him alone. Tall, sharply dressed. With the kind of confidence that didn't need announcing, he carried himself like a man certain of his position at the top of the food chain. At 39, he had already built a reputation on Wall Street as someone who didn't blink before making brutal decisions. Investors trusted him. Rivals feared him. And behind closed doors, he nurtured a belief that nothing, and no one, could ever truly leave him. To Lillian, he hadn't always been this way. When they first met in a small bookstore downtown, Adrian had seemed charming, unexpectedly soft-spoken for a man in finance. He carried a copy of The Alchemist and told her he admired dreamers. She had believed him. She didn't realize until years later that he collected dreamers the same way he collected expensive watches, because they made him appear more human. But now, the charm was a shell. A polished, empty thing. Adrian controlled everything in their home with the precision of a man running a corporation. He monitored the bank accounts. He reviewed every purchase. He chose their friends, their vacations, even the clothes Lillian wore to formal events. He disguised control as protection, always with the same line: "I just want what's best for us." Over time, Lillian stopped questioning him, partly out of love, partly out of exhaustion. The late nights at the office had become normal. The sudden business trips, the unexplained expenses, the scent of unfamiliar perfume that brushed past him when he leaned down to kiss their son goodnight. Whenever Lillian hesitated, Adrian would tilt his head and smile a cold, measured smile. Don't start imagining things again, he'd say. You know how your anxiety gets. Gaslighting as gentle as silk, as lethal as poison. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was how far the betrayal stretched. Adrian wasn't just cheating. He was planning his exit. His perfect exit. A divorce on his terms, a custody battle stacked in his favor, a new marriage already waiting in the shadows with Marina Vale. The woman whose diamond ring now glimmered on Lillian's sofa like a warning. The man she had loved didn't just break vows, he was preparing to erase her. The confrontation began long before Lillian realized it. It started with the way Adrian entered the penthouse that night. Too relaxed, too smug, as if the world had just handed him a victory he didn't earn. He loosened his tie, tossed his Mont Blanc pen onto the marble counter, and poured himself a glass of scotch without acknowledging her standing there, holding the diamond ring between shaking fingers. When she finally found the courage to speak, her voice was small. "Adrian, who does this belong to?" He studied the ring only long enough to dismiss it. "It's nothing. Probably left by someone from the cleaning service." "There is no cleaning service on Tuesdays," she whispered. Adrian's jaw tightened, but his smile stayed intact. Sharp, practiced. "Lillian, don't do this. You always overreact." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse him. She simply placed the ring on the counter, right beside his untouched scotch. "Oliver said a woman was here yesterday." That pierced him. Just a flicker. But enough. His expression darkened, and the mask slipped. "You're putting ideas in his head now?" "No," she said softly. "He's telling the truth." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Adrian straightened, smoothing his shirt sleeves like a man preparing for war. "You need help," he said coldly. "Real help. This anxiety of yours. It's becoming dangerous. I won't let you poison our son with your delusions." There it was. The shift. The threat disguised as concern. The dagger hidden in silk. And then, it happened. He reached for the ring, turned it in his fingers, and muttered, "You weren't supposed to find this yet." The room spun. The betrayal, once invisible, now stood naked in the open. Lillian felt her knees weaken, but she didn't collapse. Not this time. She looked at the man she once trusted with her entire life and saw something terrifying. Indifference. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't conflicted. He had already moved on. She simply hadn't received the memo. Before she could step back, a voice echoed from the hallway. Young, feminine, far too familiar. "Adrian? Did she find it?" Lillian turned. Marina Vale stood there, wearing the same perfume Lillian had smelled on the sofa. And in that instant, the world she fought to protect shattered. Not privately, but brutally, publicly, right inside her home. Lillian didn't remember how she ended up in the bedroom. One moment she was staring at Marina's silhouette in the hallway, and the next she was gripping the edge of the dresser, breath shallow, vision blurred. The penthouse that once felt too big now felt suffocating, pressing against her ribs like invisible hands. She tried to inhale, but the air wouldn't come. The weight of humiliation, betrayal, and fear clawed up her throat. From the living room, muffled voices drifted down the hall. Marina's soft, taunting laugh. Adrian's low whisper, sharp with annoyance. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. She was no longer part of the equation. She had been replaced. Quietly, efficiently. Like a piece of furniture Adrian no longer found useful. Her hands shook violently as she reached for the glass of water on the nightstand, knocking it over. It shattered on the floor, crystal fragments scattering like the life she no longer recognized. The sound jolted her, and she pressed both hands to her mouth to keep from crying out. Oliver was sleeping down the hall. He couldn't hear her break. For a moment, she let the tears come. Not loud, not dramatic, but in trembling waves that made her shoulders curl inward. She slid to the floor, knees pulling to her chest, forehead resting against them. A quiet, desperate collapse. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't form, and answers she already feared. Was Adrian planning to take Oliver from her? Would he paint her as unstable? Had he already begun? A faint memory surfaced, the way he monitored her prescriptions, the way he insisted she rest more, the way he told friends Lillian had been struggling mentally. At the time, she thought he was being protective. Now she saw the strategy behind it. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She flinched, half expecting another blow. But when she glanced at the screen, her breath hitched. A message from Adrian. "Don't make a scene. We'll discuss your future tomorrow." Your future. Not our future. Not our family. Something inside her cracked. Not the fragile part that had always tried to keep peace, but a deeper part, one she didn't know she still had. She wiped her face, stood slowly, and looked at herself in the mirror. This wasn't the woman Adrian thought he could destroy. Not anymore. Lillian didn't sleep that night. She sat at the edge of the bed, listening to every sound drifting through the penthouse. Adrian's footsteps, Marina's murmured laughter, the closing of doors that were no longer hers to open. But as the hours crawled by, pain slowly shifted into something sharper, something that felt almost like clarity. Shortly after dawn, she went to the living room to gather Oliver's things for school. The place was immaculate again, as if the previous night had been erased. Only one object remained out of place, Adrian's briefcase left half open near the sofa. He never left it unattended. Ever. It was practically an extension of his hand. Lillian hesitated. She wasn't a snoop. She had never touched his things without permission. But permission was no longer relevant, not after what he had done. Her fingers moved before her mind caught up. Inside the briefcase, beneath neatly arranged folders, she found a stack of documents, divorce drafts, custody projections, asset division outlines. Her name appeared on nearly every page, framed in cold legal language that made her stomach twist. Adrian had already begun the process, behind her back, with timelines, strategies, and lawyers. He wasn't waiting to discuss her future. He had already decided it. But the real twist wasn't the divorce. It was the file at the bottom of the stack, a confidential financial ledger labeled Vale Holdings, Irregular Transfers. Vale, Marina's last name. Lillian skimmed the pages, her heart pounding. The numbers didn't lie. Marina had been quietly siphoning funds from one of Adrian's subsidiary accounts, small amounts at first, then bolder, almost as if she expected Adrian not to look. But someone else had looked, because another name had signed the audit at the end of the report. Elias Vale, Marina's older brother, a man Adrian despised, a man powerful enough to bury someone like Adrian without blinking. Lillian's breath caught. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a war Adrian didn't know he was already losing. For the first time in months, a strange feeling surged inside her. Hope, faint, but real. Adrian thought she was powerless. He had no idea she held the one thing that could destroy him. Lillian had never thought of herself as a woman capable of reinvention. Reinvention belonged to other people. The bold, the fearless, the women who walked into rooms with the certainty that they deserved to be there. She had always entered quietly, apologetically, hoping not to take up too much space. But that morning, as she stood in the penthouse bathroom staring at her reflection in the mirror, something was undeniably different. Her eyes, once soft, hesitant, now held a focus she hadn't seen in years. The truth had shattered her. but it had also awakened her. She showered, letting the hot water burn away the remnants of the night before, washing off the scent of tears and betrayal. When she stepped out, she wrapped herself in one of Adrian's oversized towels, not out of sentimental habit, but because it was the only thing left in the apartment that still felt like it belonged to her. She dressed with purpose: dark jeans, a crisp white blouse, a beige coat she hadn't worn in ages because Adrian once suggested it made her look too serious. Today, seriousness was exactly what she needed. She pulled her hair into a clean, sharp ponytail, her hand steady. For the first time in a long time, she saw not the fragile wife Adrian had tried to mold, but the woman she used to be. The one who once dreamed, once fought, once believed she could build a life of her own. As she zipped Oliver's backpack and prepared breakfast, her movements were controlled, deliberate. She wasn't running, she was preparing. She wasn't hiding, she was planning. When Adrian finally emerged from the bedroom, adjusting his cufflinks like a man ready to conquer another day, he barely glanced her way. "We'll talk tonight," he said, already reaching for his briefcase. For the first time, she didn't flinch. "Sure," she replied calmly. Something in her tone made him pause. Just a flicker. But enough for him to turn, eyebrows drawn. She gave him nothing. No fear, no trembling, no tears to feed his ego. He smirked, interpreting her composure as surrender. "That's better," he said. "We'll make this smooth if you cooperate." He walked out the door, believing he had won. He didn't realize that by leaving her alone with his briefcase, his secrets, and her awakening strength, he had just armed her with everything she needed. Lillian Hart was no longer breaking. She was becoming. Lillian didn't plan to cross paths with Adrian that afternoon, but fate, or something sharper, intervened. She had taken Oliver to school, her steps steady, her mind clearer than it had been in years. When she walked back toward the main entrance, adjusting her coat against the cold Manhattan wind, a sleek black town car pulled up. The rear door opened, and out stepped Marina Vale, dressed in a fitted ivory coat, sunglasses too large for the early morning sun, and an expression that swung between triumph and irritation. Behind her came Adrian. His hand briefly touched Marina's lower back, a gesture so familiar, Lillian felt her stomach lurch. But she didn't retreat. She didn't lower her gaze. She stayed exactly where she was, standing tall on the school sidewalk, surrounded by parents, teachers, and the everyday hum of morning routines. It was the perfect stage. Marina smirked first. "Oh, you're still here." Adrian stiffened, clearly not expecting a public encounter. "Lillian, we weren't. This isn't." But Lillian wasn't listening. Not to him. Her eyes were on Marina, who seemed more annoyed than embarrassed. "You should start packing," Marina said casually. "Adrian and I have a lot to prepare." A few parents slowed their steps, sensing tension. Whispers floated. Lillian's pulse pounded, but her voice emerged steady. "Interesting," she said quietly, "considering your brother is preparing something too." Marina froze. For the first time, fear flickered in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" Adrian's gaze snapped to Lillian, sharp and probing. "Lillian, don't start!" But she cut him off with a calmness that stunned even herself. "If you're going to replace me, Adrian, you might want to choose someone who isn't stealing from your company." The sidewalk fell silent. Marina's breath hitched. Adrian's face drained of color. Lillian didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every word was clear, deliberate. Irregular transfers, Vale Holdings, signed off by Elias Vale. Does that sound familiar? A ripple spread through the parents gathered nearby. Marina took a step back, as if the ground had shifted under her. "You," Adrian whispered, eyes narrowing. "You went through my files." "No," Lillian replied softly. "You left them open." And with that, she stepped past the two of them, her coat catching the morning light, her composure unshakable. For the first time, Adrian Locke realized he wasn't holding the upper hand anymore. Lillian was. That evening, the penthouse felt different. Not quieter, but tense. Almost electric, as if the walls themselves sensed a storm coming. Lillian returned home before Adrian, giving herself time to breathe, to think, to prepare for whatever would happen next. She made dinner for Oliver, read him his favorite story, and tucked him into bed with a kiss that lingered a little longer than usual. When the front door finally opened, the sound echoed sharply through the hall. Adrian stepped in with a heaviness she had never seen before. His tie was loosened, his expression carved with barely contained fury. He threw his coat onto the sofa, the same sofa where she had found the ring, and walked toward her with slow, calculated steps. "What did you say to Marina today?" His voice was low, dangerous. Lillian didn't flinch. "The truth." "You humiliated us," he hissed. "In public." "At Oliver's school." "No," she corrected quietly. "You did that when you brought her there." He slammed a hand against the wall beside her, not touching her, but close enough that the force rattled a picture frame. "You don't understand what you're doing. You're making things worse for yourself." "For myself?" She let out a soft, humorless laugh. "Or for you?" His nostrils flared. The mask was gone now, replaced by raw, simmering panic. For the first time, Lillian sensed something she had never felt from him. Fear. Real fear. Not of losing her, but of losing the empire he had built on lies. "You think you know something," Adrian said, voice cracking at the edges. "You think a file makes you powerful?" "No," she said softly, "but it makes you vulnerable." That hit him. Hard. He stepped back, studying her like she was a different species. "Who have you been talking to?" "No one yet," she replied. "But Elias Vale is looking for answers, and I imagine he's highly motivated." Adrian's face blanched. "Stay out of this, Lillian. I'm warning you." She inhaled slowly, steadying the thunder inside her chest. "You don't get to warn me anymore." Silence. Heavy. Final. For the first time since she married him, she watched Adrian Locke lose control. Not of her, but of himself. He turned away, muttering something under his breath, and she realized the unthinkable. He wasn't planning to negotiate. He was planning to eliminate the problem. Her. The next morning, Lillian woke with a sense of heaviness, as if the air itself had thickened overnight. Something in Adrian's eyes the previous evening had unsettled her. Not anger, not frustration, but calculation. The kind of calculation she had seen him use during ruthless business negotiations, right before eliminating someone who stood in his way. She dressed Oliver for school, forcing a smile she didn't feel. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied his shoelaces. "Mommy, are you okay?" he asked softly. She brushed his cheek and nodded. "Of course, baby. I'm just tired." But inside, her heart beat unevenly. After dropping him off, she returned to the penthouse and immediately sensed something was wrong. The place was too quiet, too still, like a predator waiting. She walked toward the kitchen and froze. Adrian was already home, standing by the counter in a dark suit, his expression unreadable. "You're back early," she said carefully. "I canceled my meetings." He lifted a small folder from the countertop. "We need to talk about these." It was the ledger. The financial document she thought she had put back exactly where she found it. She felt her stomach drop. "Adrian, You think you have leverage," he interrupted, voice chillingly calm. "You don't," she swallowed. You were stealing money. Marina was involved. Elias. He stepped closer, forcing her back against the kitchen island. Stop pretending you know how any of this works. You found something you shouldn't have. And now you're making very stupid decisions. Her pulse raced. I didn't tell anyone. But you could. His voice lowered. And that makes you a liability. A cold shiver ran down her spine. So here's what's going to happen, Adrian said. You're going to sign a preliminary separation agreement. You'll keep shared custody. You'll stay in the city. And you won't mention these documents again. In return, I'll make sure you're safe. Safe. The word tasted like poison. And if I don't sign, she whispered. His smile was slow, controlled, terrifying. Then things get difficult. For you. And for Oliver. Her breath caught. Adrian leaned in slightly, almost gently. I don't want to hurt you, Lillian, but I will protect what's mine. When he walked away, she remained frozen, gripping the counter until her knuckles whitened. This was no longer about betrayal. This was survival. Lillian spent the rest of the day moving like a shadow inside the penthouse, careful, silent, hyper-aware of every sound. Adrian had left again, back to the office, or maybe to Marina, but his warning echoed through the rooms long after the door closed. She felt trapped. Yet something inside her refused to collapse this time. Survival instincts sharpened. Fear began to harden into strategy. Around noon, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. But something, a flicker of intuition, made her swipe to answer. "Lillian Hart?" a deep voice asked. She hesitated. "Yes. Who is this?" "This is Elias Vale." Her breath caught. Marina's older brother. The name she had seen on the audit. The man Adrian feared. The man she had never met. "I think," Elias continued, "you and I need to talk." Lillian's pulse raced. "I don't understand." "I believe you found something you weren't meant to," he said. "My sister is reckless. Adrian Locke is worse. You're standing between two people who would burn each other alive if it benefited them." She glanced toward the front door, instinctively checking if Adrian had returned. "How do you know any of this?" "Because," Elias replied, "I've been tracking the financial discrepancies for months. Marina tried to frame me for them. I let her try. But I'm not the one she should fear." He paused, his tone softening. "And neither are you. Not anymore." Lillian gripped the phone tighter. "What do you want?" "To give you options," Elias said. "Something you don't have right now. You've been cornered, choked, controlled. But you're holding evidence that could protect you. Evidence that Adrian would do anything to retrieve." Her voice wavered. "He threatened Oliver." Silence. Then a cold edge entered Elias's voice. "Then Adrian Locke just made a mistake, a serious one." Lillian swallowed hard. "What do you expect from me?" "Meet me," Elias said. "Somewhere Adrian won't think to look. Somewhere safe. I'll explain everything. What Marina did, what Adrian's hiding, and how you can get out of this intact." "Why help me?" she whispered. Elias exhaled slowly. "Because you're the only innocent person in this mess, and because someone should finally choose your side." For the first time in days, something cracked through the fear. A lifeline. Lillian arrived at the small cafe on the Lower East Side 15 minutes early, her heart thudding beneath her coat. The place was quiet, tucked between a bookstore and a florist, far from the polished Manhattan neighborhoods Adrian frequented. A perfect hiding spot, Elias had said. Safe. Neutral. Invisible. She chose a corner table, facing the door, hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee she barely tasted. Every time the door chimed, her breath caught. What if Adrian followed her? What if Marina did? What if this was all a trap? Then he walked in. Elias Vale didn't look anything like she expected. He wasn't polished like Adrian, nor sly like Marina. He carried an understated confidence, dressed in a charcoal coat dusted with winter air, his gaze steady and unreadable. He approached her table with quiet steps, as if careful not to startle her. "Lillian," he said gently. She nodded, unable to speak at first. He sat across from her, giving her a moment to breathe. "You're scared," he observed softly. "Good. Fear keeps you alert, but don't let it paralyze you." She swallowed. "Why me? Why involve me in this?" "Because Adrian already involved you the moment he decided to betray you," Elias replied. "And because Marina dragged you into something far bigger than an affair." Lillian's hands tightened around the coffee cup. "I found documents, transfers, signatures. That's why Adrian panicked." Elias leaned in slightly. "Those files show two things: Marina stealing money and Adrian covering it up. If that information leaks, both of them burn. And trust me, they know it." Lillian felt a chill crawl up her spine. "So what happens now?" "You have leverage," he said. "But leverage won't protect you if you stay in that penthouse. Adrian is unpredictable. Cornered men make dangerous choices." Her pulse quickened. "He threatened Oliver." "That," Elias said, voice sharpening, "is why I'm helping you." She finally met his eyes. There was no pity in them, only resolve. "What do you want me to do?" she whispered. "Leave," he said. "Not eventually. Not when it feels safe. Leave tonight. Quietly. Take Oliver. I'll handle the rest." Lillian's breath trembled. "He'll come after me." "I know," Elias replied. "That's why we need to move before he does." For the first time, she realized this wasn't a conversation. It was a rescue plan, and she was already in the middle of it. The decision settled in Lillian's chest like a stone, heavy, terrifying, irreversible. But once it was there, she felt something unexpected. Clarity. She returned to the penthouse just after sunset, her mind replaying Elias's words with every step. Leave tonight. Quietly. Before he moves first. The elevator doors opened to a darkened living room. The penthouse was silent. Too silent. Adrian wasn't home yet. A dangerous blessing. She walked straight to Oliver's room, finding him on the floor, building towers out of wooden blocks. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "How about we go on a little adventure tonight?" Oliver looked up, eyes bright with curiosity. "Like a trip?" "Yes," she said softly, forcing a smile. "Just you and me." He nodded without hesitation. He trusted her completely. That alone nearly made her cry. She packed quietly, only essentials. Clothes, Oliver's favorite stuffed bunny, her sketchbook, and the folder Elias asked her to keep close. She avoided anything that would draw attention to her absence. No suitcases, no obvious signs of departure. Only 2 backpacks. Every sound felt magnified. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint whistle of wind against the windows, her own heartbeat thudding too loudly inside her ribs. As she zipped the final pocket, the front door clicked. Her blood froze. Footsteps entered the penthouse, steady, heavy, unmistakable. Adrian was home. "Lillian?" His voice called out, deep and sharp. "We need to finish our conversation." Her breath stalled. She pressed a finger to her lips, signaling Oliver to stay quiet. She tucked him behind her, slipping into the hallway shadows. Adrian's footsteps moved closer, pausing outside the bedrooms. "Where are you?" he asked again, but this time the softness was gone. This was a hunt. Lillian tightened her grip on Oliver's hand. They had seconds, maybe less. A muffled buzz suddenly came from her phone. Elias's message. "Car is waiting at the side entrance. Go now." Her pulse surged. Adrian was turning toward the hallway. She slipped out the back door, barely breathing, pulling Oliver with her. Down the service stairwell. Through the dim industrial corridor, out into the freezing Manhattan night. Oliver shivered. Lillian wrapped him in her coat. And when the black SUV headlights flicked on, she knew. There was no turning back. Adrian Locke no longer owned her future. She had just stolen it back. Adrian Locke realized something was wrong the moment he stepped into the penthouse. The lights were still off. The air felt too still. And the faint echo of the back stairwell door slamming somewhere in the building sent a prickle down his spine. He scanned the living room, noticing the smallest details. Oliver's shoes missing, Lillian's coat gone. The quiet disruption in the space he believed he controlled down to the last inch. Then he saw it. The open drawer near the entry table. She had taken their passports. His jaw tightened. A slow burn of fury rising from deep inside his chest. "Lillian," he muttered, voice low, venomous. "You made a very stupid mistake." He dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. His fingers clenched around the phone. Within seconds, he was calling Marina. "You need to get to my place now," he barked the moment she answered. "Adrian, it's late." "She's gone. Take a car. Now." A long pause. "Gone how?" "She ran," he hissed. "And she took Oliver." Marina swore under her breath. "Where would she go?" "She's not smart enough to plan this alone," Adrian snapped. "Someone helped her." And then it hit him. Elias. Rage ignited in his eyes. "I'll ruin him," Adrian said. "I'll ruin both of them." He grabbed his laptop, fingers flying as he pulled up security logs, bank alerts, anything that might give him a lead. But Lillian had taken nothing traceable. No credit cards, no digital footprints. She had disappeared like smoke. He slammed the laptop shut. "This isn't happening," he growled. "She doesn't get to leave me. She doesn't get to decide." Marina appeared an hour later, wearing a hooded coat and oversized sunglasses, anxious and irritated. "So what's the plan?" Adrian stepped toward her, eyes cold. "We make her come back." "By force?" Marina whispered. "No," he said darkly. "By law." He pulled out the folder. Lillian's medical history, prescription notes, therapy visit summaries he had quietly collected over the years. A weapon disguised as concern. "I'll file for emergency custody," he said. "I'll claim she's unstable. She won't stand a chance." Marina smirked. "And Elias?" Adrian's stare hardened to ice. "I'll handle him personally." He didn't know yet that Lillian was already far beyond his reach, but he would. Very soon. The SUV sped through the dark Manhattan streets, its headlights slicing through the winter mist. Lillian held Oliver tightly in the back seat, her arms wrapped around him, as if her body alone could shield him from everything closing in behind them. He rested his head against her chest, half asleep, unaware of the danger nipping at their heels. Elias sat in the front beside the driver, posture rigid, phone pressed to his ear. His voice, usually composed, carried a sharp edge. "He knows she's gone. He's already moving. Freeze every trackable asset under her name. He'll try to use money and influence first." Lillian swallowed hard. "He'll try to take Oliver." Elias turned toward her, expression steady but fierce. "He won't get the chance. Not if we stay ahead of him." The SUV veered onto the FDR drive, the river glinting coldly beside them. For a brief moment, Lillian looked out the window and saw the skyline she once believed defined her life. The glittering towers, the promise of luxury, the illusion of safety. Now it looked like a distant battlefield she was finally escaping. Her phone buzzed. A message from Adrian. 3 words that chilled her blood. "You won't win." Her hands shook. Elias noticed immediately. "Don't answer," he said quietly. "That's exactly what he wants. To rattle you. He needs you afraid. That's how he's always kept control. Lillian closed her eyes, forcing her breath to steady. I don't understand how he became this person. He didn't become it, Elias replied. He always was. You just loved him too much to see the sharp edges. Suddenly, the SUV slowed. The driver adjusted the rearview mirror. We're being followed. Lillian's heart lurched. Behind them, a black sedan appeared, speeding up, weaving through traffic with mechanical precision. Adrian. It had to be. Oliver stirred in her arms. Mommy, what's happening? She kissed his hair. It's okay, baby. I'm right here. Elias leaned forward. Take the next exit. Lose them in the side streets. The SUV swerved sharply, tires screeching as it veered off the highway. The sedan followed. Lillian felt her pulse hammering. But beneath the terror was something else. A flicker of defiance. Adrian could chase her, threaten her, try to corner her. But he no longer owned her fear. Not tonight. Not ever again. The SUV jolted as it swerved through the narrow side streets of the Lower East Side, engine roaring as the driver pushed its limits. Behind them, the black sedan mirrored every turn, its headlights flickering like a predator's gaze locked on prey. Lillian's grip tightened around Oliver, her heart pounding so loudly she feared he could hear it. Don't look back, Elias said firmly, even as he did exactly that, his jaw clenched. It's him! Of course it was. No one else would risk this. No one else would chase a mother and child through the city like a man possessed. Exit here, Elias commanded. The SUV skidded onto a dimly lit street behind an abandoned warehouse. The sedan followed instantly. There was no shaking him, not tonight. The SUV screeched to a halt. Out, the driver ordered. Now! Elias jumped out first, then reached back to help Lillian. Take Oliver and stay behind me. Her legs trembled as she stepped onto the cold pavement, clutching her son to her chest. The winter air sliced through her coat, sharp and merciless. She heard the sedan doors slam, footsteps, fast, heavy, certain. Adrian stepped into the open, his expression carved from pure rage. Lillian, he said, voice echoing in the empty street. You're coming with me? No, she replied, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. I'm not. His eyes flicked to Elias, darkening. You think he's going to save you? You think he cares? You're being used, Lillian, just like you've always been too blind to see. Elias took a step forward. She's not going anywhere with you. Adrian laughed, a dry, bitter sound. You think you can stand between me and my family? You stopped being her family the moment you became her threat, Elias shot back. Adrian's gaze snapped to Lillian. You're mentally unstable, Lillian. I have records, prescriptions, therapy notes. I can take Oliver from you with a single court order. Her stomach twisted, but she didn't step back. You collected those, she said quietly, because you always intended to use them against me. Adrian smirked. And I will. Elias's voice lowered. Dangerous. Not if you're indicted first. Adrian froze. Lillian lifted the folder slightly, the one containing the evidence he didn't know she carried with her tonight. The wind gusted. Trash rustled. The city held its breath. For the first time, Adrian Locke didn't look invincible. He looked afraid. Adrian's confidence cracked like thin ice under weight. For the first time, he didn't advance, didn't shout, didn't reach for Lillian. He simply stared at the folder in her hand, the same folder he thought he had hidden deep enough for no one to ever see. That belongs to me, he said, voice strained. No, Lillian replied, stepping back protectively as Oliver clung to her coat. It belongs to the truth. Elias moved subtly, positioning himself between Adrian and the SUV. Funny thing about the truth, he said. You can run from it, but you can't outrun a paper trail. Adrian's eyes flicked toward him, furious. My lawyers will bury anything you try to do. Will they? Elias asked calmly. Because I sent copies of these documents to 3 federal investigators before I got in the car tonight. Adrian froze. Lillian blinked in shock. You did? Elias nodded slightly without taking his eyes off Adrian. I don't play games with criminals. Something shifted in Adrian then, a flicker of panic sliding behind his rage. You have no idea what you're doing, he snapped. This will ruin all of us? No, Elias corrected, just you. The black sedan engine revved behind Adrian, as if urging him to retreat. But he lunged forward instead, eyes wild. Give me the folder! Elias stepped in front of him, blocking the path entirely. The 2 men stood inches apart, tension crackling like electricity. Adrian's breath came fast, uncontrolled. Elias's remained steady. You were sloppy, Elias said quietly. Desperate men always are. Adrian swung. A sharp, reckless blow. Elias dodged easily, catching Adrian's wrist midair with a practiced grip. A twist, a shove, and Adrian stumbled backward, collapsing onto the cold pavement. Lillian gasped. Oliver whimpered. The night seemed to hold still. Adrian glared up at them, wild-eyed, humiliated in a way he had never experienced. I won't let you take my son, he growled. Lillian's voice broke, but with strength, not fear. He isn't your trophy, Adrian. He's a child, and he deserves better than this. Elias extended a hand to help her into the SUV. We need to go, now. As the SUV doors slammed shut and the vehicle sped away, Adrian remained on the ground, breathing hard, surrounded by the ruins of his illusion of power. For the first time, he wasn't the hunter. He was the man being left behind. The next 72 hours unfolded like a storm no one could stop, least of all Adrian Locke. While Lillian and Oliver were moved to a safe apartment overlooking the quiet edges of Brooklyn Heights, Elias began orchestrating the legal and financial avalanche that had been years in the making. By morning, headlines appeared across financial networks. Vail Holdings exposes internal fraud linked to Locke Investments. Within hours, Adrian's firm released a statement suspending him pending investigation. By noon, federal agents appeared at his Park Avenue office, quietly collecting documents, while confused employees whispered behind frosted glass walls. Elias didn't lie. He had sent everything. Lillian watched the news from the small apartment's living room, Oliver coloring beside her on the rug. Her chest tightened, not with guilt, but with disbelief. She had lived so long in Adrian's shadow that seeing him unravel felt surreal. Distant, almost impossible. A knock sounded at the door. She tensed, but Elias appeared in the doorway, holding a folder and wearing an expression that was both serious and reassuring. It's happening faster than expected, he said. Adrian underestimated how many people he's stepped on over the years. Lillian swallowed. Will he go to jail? Most likely, Elias said, but he'll fight until his last breath. You know that. Yes, she did. As if summoned by her thoughts, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Adrian's number. Again. Dozens of calls ignored, and yet he kept trying, relentless. Elias picked it up before she could. Don't, she whispered. He answered anyway, putting it on speaker. Adrian's voice exploded through the room, hoarse, furious, unhinged. You think you've won? You think you can take my family, my company, my life? Lillian, listen to me. Elias is using you. He's— No, Lillian said, stepping forward. Her voice was quiet but steady. The only person who ever used me was you. Adrian's breath caught. Shocked, wounded, furious. You can't do this, he spat. You're nothing without me. Lillian closed her eyes, letting the final chain break. Then it's a good thing I stopped being yours. Elias ended the call. Silence filled the room. Not heavy, not frightening, but liberating. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like hers. Spring sunlight poured through the courthouse windows, casting long, warm beams across the polished floors. Lillian walked beside Oliver, her hand gently guiding him as they approached the family court chamber. She felt steady, grounded in a way she hadn't felt in years. Today wasn't just another hearing. It was freedom. Adrian was already inside, accompanied by his lawyers. His once impeccable appearance now carried a sharp edge of desperation. Sleepless eyes, a too-tight jaw, the unmistakable look of a man watching his empire crumble grain by grain. When Lillian entered, his gaze locked onto her, anger flaring, followed by something unexpected. Fear. Elias stepped into the room behind her, calm, composed, a quiet pillar of strength. He nodded to her, a reassurance she didn't realize she needed. The judge began. Mr. Locke, due to ongoing criminal investigations, your petition for emergency custody is denied. Furthermore, evidence shows attempts to manipulate medical documentation to discredit Mrs. Hart. This court does not tolerate such behavior. Adrian shot up from his seat. She's unstable. She's being manipulated. Sit down, the judge ordered. He didn't. So a guard escorted him back into his chair. The judge turned to Lillian, her tone softening. Mrs. Hart, you are granted full temporary custody until further notice. Given the severity of Mr. Locke's legal situation, this ruling is in the best interest of your child. Lillian exhaled slowly, her chest loosening as if years of suffocation had lifted all at once. Oliver squeezed her hand. We did it, Mommy, he whispered. She smiled. Yes, sweetheart. We did. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted Adrian's name, not hers. For once, he was the headline, not as a powerful executive, but as a man exposed. Are you ready? Elias asked quietly as they stepped away from the chaos. For what? Lillian asked. For a life that finally belongs to you. He reached out, not forceful, not assuming, gentle, offering a beginning rather than taking anything away. She took his hand, not because she needed saving, but because she finally understood she deserved more than survival. She deserved joy. Months later, in a small ceremony beneath blooming cherry trees in Brooklyn Bridge Park, Lillian and Elias exchanged vows. Oliver stood beside them, grinning, holding the rings. Not diamonds symbolizing lies, but simple bands symbolizing choice. And as Lillian looked toward the skyline where her story once began, she realized she hadn't just escaped, she had risen. So that's how our story closes tonight. And if you are still here, still listening with me right now, then something in Lillian's journey must have touched you. Maybe in a quiet corner of your heart. Maybe in a place you haven't visited in a long time. Life has a way of breaking us open before it heals us, doesn't it? The Stoics used to say, the obstacle is the way. And sometimes the pain we think will destroy us becomes the very bridge that carries us to a better life. Lillian's story reminds us that strength isn't loud. Sometimes, strength is simply choosing yourself after years of forgetting who you are. Sometimes, it's protecting your child, your peace, your dignity, no matter who tries to take them from you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And tonight, maybe you felt that truth. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think, breathe, or feel just a little differently, then let me know you're still here. Hit like, share it with someone who needs courage, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story we walk through together. You're never alone here. We're healing, one story at a time. This story is a work of fiction created solely for entertainment and emotional reflection. All characters, events, and situations, while inspired by themes that many people may relate to, are entirely imagined and not based on real individuals or real legal cases. The purpose of this narrative is to explore personal growth, resilience, and healing through dramatic storytelling. Any resemblance to actual persons, relationships, or circumstances is purely coincidental. Viewers should not interpret the events as factual or instructional, but rather as a creative illustration of human strength and the choices we make when facing hardship. Our intention is to provide meaningful content, not to mislead or present false information. Thank you for supporting the channel and for understanding that our stories aim to inspire reflection, empathy, and hope through fictional drama.